All right, welcome to everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. Uh, sound check, sound check. All right, so I have covered this type of topic before recently, but nonetheless, it's still good to do this. So, a lot of people out there, even though not that many people watch my channels and all that, I've been saying for a very long time, for about 8 years on YouTube, that 2023, 2024 should be the end of days according to certain biblical prophecies, the ones that I've got in my book. Now that 2024 is ended and it's 2025, a lot of people, I would assume, would just think, oh, well, that's because it was all wrong. Well, like I said before, and I want to point out for people, the biblical prophecies are what they are. If the Bible's real, if God is real, and He gave us these biblical prophecies, then we can't just flush them down the drain, because it's not about me. It's about, I'm just drawing attention to what these prophecies say, how they align with major historical events, and it's so well confirmed that it's just incredible, and it could not be a coincidence, right? And I've argued before that the very fact that these seven core prophecies correlate with all this human, major events in human history that pertain to what the Bible prophecies talk about, that's this great confirmation that it couldn't be a fraudulent work. It had to be a real prophecy that was uttered, and over the course of 2,500 years, these prophecies came true at the right times, involving the right peoples and nations, and the right events took place. And there's no way that someone could just come up with this fraudulently as a fake prediction and it come true. So many of the correlating aspects of these prophecies come true. So I think the odds are in favor that these prophecies are legit. And when we look at history, they've already all come true. So one thing I want to draw attention to for everybody who's heard about my, stuff that I've talked about for 8 years, including what I go through in the book, that this stuff has not been disproven, debunked, or invalidated just because we're still here and it's 2025. We have more proof than ever that it's imminent and that all this was correct. Thankfully, uh, evidence is world events out of my control that are inarguably happening, and major world events. So, but anyways, the first thing I want to stress is that the prophecies are not invalidated for any reason. They're valid prophecies, and about 99% of them already came true. This is what I want to draw attention to again. Even all the seven core prophecies I go through in my book here, all of them highlight many events that lead up over a period of about 2,500 years up until the end of days, the final year in 2024. Okay, but all of those prophecies and their involved events have already occurred and been fulfilled in history, most of them a long time ago. Okay, a lot of the important and final ones took place in 1948 with the rebirth of Israel and the end of the Second World War, and so forth and so forth. So almost all of those prophecies, technically speaking, because they just, anyways, about 99%, you could say, of those prophecies have already been fulfilled. There's nothing to debunk, right? The only thing that is left is the final domino, which is the part in Daniel 12 where he says the final 75 years, which take you to the 1335th, which is the last, the end of days, as God says, in about two places in that verse. Or he says it, I'm pretty sure he says it at least once. But nonetheless, God identifies it as the end of days, right? So, and it's the time of the arrival of the judgment, because that's what God describes the end of days as being like in the book of Daniel. So the 1335th correlates to 2023, 2024, okay, which is why for 8 years I've always said those years as being the years it would take place. And that's why when I got my book published, it's got that on the title, because based on the maths and the world events, it should have been 2023 or 2024. And why do I say 23 or 24? Because of year flux. There's 12 months in a year. If the start of these measures of time, for example, the final one up to the 1335th, you have to know when that starting event took place, its date, so that you can start the measure. That's the only way when you get to the end of the measure, you can correlate anything. So we don't know God's chosen starting day, week, month of any given year for anything unless it's overtly specified. So we have to allow for up to 12 months of fluctuation when we consider a solution. So if 2023 is what the maths point to, which they do, it could represent logically the end of 2023. One would have expected it possibly to happen at the end of 2023, at the start of 2024. This is what I did initially. Obviously, when 23 passed and 24 started, we could rule that one out. But then we have to allow for 12 months of flux. That was the year 2024. But now that has just run its course. Okay, but is anything disproven? No, because like I said, almost every aspect of all of those prophecies has already taken place. The only last thing that had yet to be fulfilled was the final and singular domino. There's only one thing, and that thing is the cap at the end of the final 75 years, which means the 1335th year should be what God has termed thy lot at the end of days. Okay, now it doesn't specify that precisely on that day would be the end. In all fairness, one could fairly argue it could be weeks or months in addition to that, maybe even half a year or something like that. If we start stretching it out by years, then that, makes the whole point of the 1335 ending at a fixed point, being 2024 or whatever, makes it less relevant, right? But in all fairness, it could happen months into 2025 or something like that there. Now, the other thing that we need to consider as well is that all of these prophecies that I've covered in my talks for 8 years and in my books may also still be validly true. This is another observation point, because the Dome of the Rock, which is a pivotal aspect in some of those prophecies, one or two of them, but the Dome of the Rock was built in 688, and that's its official date. That's like the widely held official date when it was started. It was finished about 3 years later in 691. Okay, and even in Islam, they record the official date, like its commemoration, like it came into existence in 688. Okay, so, and we don't know the minute details, and maybe it was the vast majority of it was actually constructed in 688, and they were just putting finishing touches or something like that on the outside or on the inside for the next few years. It could be something like that, right? But nonetheless, we always did have, and I talk about it in my book, 3 years of wiggle room, you could call it. And it's on a pivotal point, and I've been thought about this, gone through everything with the prophecies, and it doesn't alter or affect anything because this is a pivoting point, and it wouldn't contradict any of the prophecies per se. Now, the only problem I've had with this is, and I really expected something to happen in 2024 or at the start of 2025, which it could still very well do, according to a lot of other evidence. But nonetheless, I really expected it to happen around now type of thing. So, and maybe it will, right? But nonetheless, we do technically have up to 3 years wiggle room. However, the problem I've had with that is 1948 is the official year that Israel was reborn. To say that you want to take the measure of span from the finishing date for the construction of the Dome of the Rock in 691 would give you another 2 or 3 years or whatever. But the problem is that takes it past 1948. 1948 is an official date, is pretty fixed. To stretch it out to 1951, I've thought, what would be justifiable reasons to stretch it out to 1951? It would have to be God's reasonings, right? Why would God select a date 3 years after 1948, which was the official rebirth of Israel? Well, I thought to myself, maybe there were some legal proceedings. Maybe it's because they only appointed the judges or Sanhedrin or whatever 3 years later. And maybe that's like a condition to God. Like, even if Israel is reborn in this one technical sense, they need to have a judicial system before I'll count it as blah, blah, blah. Maybe, right? But this is kind of like a gray area, stretching it out, but it is not impossible or implausible. Technically, if we were to take one of the great measures of time in the prophecies from the completion date of the Dome of the Rock, we would get 3 extra years. But it's important to also remember that the official mathematical figure was 2023. 2024 is considering year flux. Okay, but going by the core numbers, 2023 is the mathematical time for when the end should be, according to the officiation of the Dome of the Rock date. So that means if we're adding 3 years on, it would be in 2026. Okay, we just started 2025. So even if we're adding on those 3 actual extra years, because we're taking it from the finishing date and not the officiation date, that would still make it very, very soon. You know what I mean? It would be next year, potentially. And then also, technically, you have to apply your flux again. So it could be technically in 2027. But I'm leaning against that because of the recent world events. Number one, in 2023, which was the actual mathematical date based on 1948, final 75 years takes you to 2023. Okay. But then you also have to consider your flux, like I said. It could have been during 2024. But in 2023, the October attack started against Israel. Undeniable. Israel itself, all its key figures, military, religious, and everything, said it's the worst attack since the terrible events of World War II, which sometimes you can't even talk about verbally, right? So even they've testified that it was the biggest and the worst attack, because it's easy for people to say, oh, they've always had turmoil between peoples in those lands, right? Since 1948. But this was the worst attack. And it continued throughout 2024 in the sense that in 2023, but especially in 2024, the world events showed us certain nations, joining their powers together to oppose Israel. Those certain nations are the very nations that Ezekiel mentions in the great prophecy about the end of days and arrival of God and Messiah. Okay? And it says in Ezekiel's prophecy, and this prophecy I didn't talk about in my book because it doesn't involve a measured span of time from God. So I didn't include it in the book. All the 7 prophecies I talk about in the book are given a numbered span of time from God as part of the prophecy to calculate with, right? So I left Ezekiel's one out to be fit and uniform. But ironically, Ezekiel's prophecy, the only one I didn't talk about in the book, Ezekiel's prophecy ended up coming true that year and throughout 2024. So in the plausible time that I always argued for. And this only perfectly confirms, even just within itself, without the other evidence I'm about to get into, that everything that I warned with these prophecies has come true. So the final domino, like I said, is the final 75 years that takes you to that, blessed is he who makes it to the 1335th. You stand in your lot at the end of days. So God himself calls it the end of days, and that would be at this point. Okay? So, where was I going with that again? Oh, yeah, the final domino, right? But in terms of proof for that final domino, because like I said, 2024 is just ended. It could still very well be, maybe there's a little slipstream and there's like a few months and it's just going to be a few weeks or a few months away. We don't know, right? Could still very well be, and that would still be so closely attached to 2024 that nothing was ever technically invalidated whatsoever. But I believe the prophecies are not logically invalidated. They've been proven because, like I said, 90-something% of all their content has already historically taken place and been proven by the major events occurring on the certain dates. The maths have been locked in and proven. So that stuff's inarguable and already astounding. It was only the final domino, the stuff that's been taking place since 1948, the final 75 years, that takes you to that end of days lot in the 1335th year, which would be 2023, 2024. So again, to stress attention to that, you can't just say that all the prophecies that I talked about are debunked. No, they're not. They were proven before I spoke about them, right? We need, as neutral witnesses who want something to be proven, whether this is all true or not, and it is imminent or not, what we need to logically find next is a cap that identifies for us with proof that the 75 years ends 2024 or whatever, 2025 for whatever reason. Okay? i.e., imminent. And what cap would we have? Well, that cap would be that final domino. There's some beef to its evidence for it, right? Now, what evidence will we get that could act as that cap to, like, yep, lock it in? This is at the end of it. It is the end of days, as God said in that verse. Well, we would have to see the events that Ezekiel foretold. And Ezekiel said that certain nations would mount up and comprise the armies of Gog and Magog. He names the nations, and the very same nations today, which do geographically even surround Israel, did join together and oppose and to each their own attack Israel in various ways and whatnot. Not getting into political arguments here, right? So Ezekiel's prophecy is part of this final domino, and it acts as a piece of proof via the world events being required. These world events have taken place as stated, as being required in that sense. They have occurred. The only aspect of that prophecy to finish is, unfortunately, as Ezekiel says, an attack on, it's probably a big bad attack, but an attack on Israel involving Jerusalem, right? So either they're just going to attack Jerusalem or all of Israel and Jerusalem. In either case, Israel's been attacked for the last year or so now. But the thing is that Jerusalem hasn't, right? And I don't, nobody wants any of this to happen. It's just what the prophecy says in the book of Ezekiel. And Zechariah as well, because Zechariah touches on the same battle. That's the only other aspect to Ezekiel and Zechariah's prophecies that hasn't occurred yet, as far as we know. So that is the only thing, material thing left to occur. And it's just like a thread, because everything else has already taken place. Those nations are mounted up. So Ezekiel's prophecy has already started and gotten rolling. We're literally just waiting on the final thread of this final domino. Okay? So that should logically show you that we already have the actual material evidence out there in the world events that are out of our control. And these events are confirming, they have not debunked or disproven what I've talked about. They're only confirming it. Okay? But in all fairness, yes, 2024 is ended now. And so what? It could be weeks or months away, and that would still fairly count anyways. I don't think any of this is worth worrying about because, like I said, the prophecies still stand. There is one verse, I'm going to throw this out there, important verse in the Gospels, I believe, where Jesus is giving a parable and says that it's talking about like the harvest time. He comes to the fig tree or whatever it is, to the vine, and there's no fruit. It's all rotten and unworthy. And he wants to dig it up and throw it away to be burned. But somebody pleads with him, like one of the gardeners is like, oh no, give us one more year and we'll dig around it and plant dung around it to, fertilize it and help it grow and give it one more year. Right. So that's the whole gist of the parable. Right. And I and others take that strongly to be a hint that God could give mankind one extra year. So we should consider that, because in all direct fairness, that verse and parable seems to obviously be meant to be interpreted that way, that God would give an extra year. I mean, that's literally basically what it says. So we should allow for it to transpire possibly in 2025. That wouldn't contradict anything whatsoever. So I say that what we need to do is wait in 2025. But the thing is this, and I could not have even predicted this. The irony in November that everybody was saying, and even before that there was this Cliff Webbot prediction made in 2009 or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. Everybody's heard the story. And I looked into it and looked, the actual creator of the Cliff Webbot does lectures on YouTube and stuff where he talks. And he does a lot of them. And it's hard to find, but I've watched other streamers talk about his videos and show samples of it. So I found out which lecture he talks in about the certain things, right? So in December 3rd this year, a lot of people were talking about there's going to be this UFO invasion type thing, this event take place in the skies over Earth. And it was foretold by this Webbot prediction that was made in 2009, right? I heard a lot about it, and there was a lot of hoopla that, oh, maybe there's going to be a UFO arrival in December 3rd. So I would say millions of people are waiting for that to happen. It's not that the Cliff Webbot is like superior in its predictions of things, but it uses what's available on the internet to make like calculated, like, like scientifically calculated by algorithms or whatever, like predictions of what will happen. So that's what it does. It's like this program. It scans material off the internet, sees patterns, or however it works, I don't know, and it predicts like certain things, right? So it predicted all these things would take place, but one of them was that basically a UFO arrival or event would take place in the skies on December 3rd. And there would be things leading up to it and things after it, but December 3rd would just be like a poignant date. So, ironically, on December 3rd, you can't even make this stuff up, and I doubt the media would do this on purpose. I'll give the media credit here. But ironically, on December 3rd, because there were so many sightings on December 3rd, it did make the news, and they started talking about it. These mystery drones and orbs flying around. But they had been occurring since mid-November, and I just hadn't really heard about it until it hit the major news, and I heard about it in the American news. And then from there, it just got crazier. So on December 3rd, it did ironically fulfill what the Cliff Webbot predicted would happen. And also the little buildup of them appearing a few weeks before, like the Webbot allegedly predicted. I'm pretty sure it did say that in his lecture. That also came true, and it's persisted since then into January of 2025, like the Cliff Webbot predicted. And it just said that December 3rd would be like a key date of them appearing, probably in large numbers. Not that any spectacular event would occur in specific. But then it also specified that humans would send up their drones and vehicles to pursue them and monitor them and try to figure them out. I believe it even details that they won't be able to be taken down. They'll be persisting, and it'll continue into January 2025. And then I believe it says that in the middle of January 2025, there'll be some type of like the humans will, whichever nation, I don't know, but the humans will send out their own craft against them to try to like intercept them or something. And then when this happens, when the basic gist is that these things aren't nefarious. I believe even the Cliff Webbot says that. And that's what I believe as well. I don't believe that all of them are nefarious. There's always some bad guys out there somewhere anyways, right? But I believe that these are not on the bad side. But anyways, that's just my opinion. But the Cliff Webbot never presents the scenario as UFOs arrive and then attack Earth. That is not what's going on. The gist of the Cliff Webbot prediction was that UFOs will arrive and be visible December 3rd, and then there will be in the air mystery phenomenon occurring where they're just highly visible, going around doing stuff, and nobody can figure it out. And that in January 2025, this will escalate to the point where at some point in January 2025, this could be the mid-January 2025 date. I can't say for sure, but at some point in January, it will escalate to where what we'll see is mystery vehicles from basically operated by two opposing alien forces. Okay, Alien Force A and Alien Force B. Alien Force A, let's just say, are friendly to Earth and want to protect us. Alien Force B doesn't. Okay, so Alien Force A will be acting to protect us and deflect us from Alien Force B. So there will be like a skirmish or whatever between the two alien forces who are operating the mystery vehicles. This is what the Cliff Webbot says in January. Okay, and it won't really affect us on the Earth too much. We'll just visibly see it taking place because I guess the good guys are doing all they can to keep it from affecting us, right? They're containing it up in the air and trying to effectively take out the bad guys. But then at some point, just like you see in the silly movies, the humans are parading in there in their jets and craft and vehicles and whatnot to go in and intercept. And then when this happens, as far as I can remember, I'm not super clear on this, but the basic gist, I believe, is that when the humans go in to intercept, that when it starts to get a little bit worse. But never have I heard in what has been discussed any super gloomy situation. It just remains as an air of mystery. Maybe there's a further lecture I didn't listen to where he talks about the later findings. I don't know. But from what I've seen and heard, it's just going to be that. There's going to be benefactors out there trying to safeguard us from whatever else is out there. And we don't know the motives of this other force. And again, this is just what the Cliff Webbot says. It's not my opinion. And but that they're going to skirmish or whatever, and it's going to, upgrade into a melee. Um, I think when the humans get involved, it turns into a melee. So it might get a little bit more chaotic at that point, but it's never, as far as I remember, been described as a super gloomy, dreadful, chaotic, like in the movies, Independence Day or something like that type event. Never like that. So maybe the good guys win in the end. That could be one thing to throw out there. But it's interesting to consider that Cliff Webbot prediction, because when you throw that in the mix, I mean, I'm not trying to praise and worship the Cliff Webbot. I don't even believe that it predicts things accurately all the time. I mean, why would it? It's not some artificial brain or some super being. It's just a program that somebody created that scans available material. Of course, it's not going to be 100% right in anything it predicts. But for whatever bizarre reason, it got this right. Maybe because there was some information out there or some trend that it recognized where it could make this prediction decades ago. I don't know. But what is true is that it did make these predictions. They have panned out so far, just like it said. It's a pretty uncanny prediction, and it has panned out. So it's not about praising the Cliff Webbot. It's just that this prediction was made based on some type of, advanced thinking beyond what an average human could do. It took a computer program, and it accurately predicted this. And what it next predicts is that it will escalate into like this conflict between Force A and Force B, and then the humans will jump in to try to intercede as well. Okay, so that's all I'm saying. So I'm just throwing that out there. That could very well happen. Now, whether that does happen and the Webbot predictions are further proven, the point is that's irrelevant, because it would just still prove the biblical end day scenario. Because I got some verses here. I don't want to read them all because there's so many of them. But so many of them are great, and they just act as great evidence. But I'm going to read the verses that mention stars and messengers, because in the Bible, I believe in Old and New Testament, in the Tanakh and the New Testament, the word star or stars can symbolize messengers. Messengers are celestial beings. They are the hosts of the heaven that inhabit the heavens, where the sun, moon, and stars are. I talk about this in my book, in chapters, in both books, I believe, with verses to substantiate the claims. There's plenty of verses in the Bible that say that what we call outer space is what he calls the heavens. So the heavens aren't some spiritual foofy place like Narnia, where everybody is like a spirit being. That would be Hades. Okay, it's a punishment to not have a body, right? If you've ever been out of body for any reason, in a medical procedure or near death experience, you would know that it's terrifying to not have a body and to be unable to go to your body, or to be separate from your body and see your body separate from you. All that is terrifying. We're used to having bodies, and that would just be like living in Hades, because when Lazarus and the other guy passed away, Lazarus was taken by the messengers. Again, they do a lot of things for God, to Abraham's bosom. But the bad guy was taken as a spirit from his body and was taken down to the Hades, right? So, but anyways, the heavens aren't described as a spiritual place where you have no bodies. The heavens are described as where the sun, moon, and stars are in many verses throughout the Bible, from front to back. It is completely concreted in. In the book of Genesis, when God created the earth and he stretched out the heavens, he put life in all of them, not just on the planet Earth. Okay, he created life throughout the heavens. It's called the host of the heavens. Lots of verses talking about this. They serve God, they come to earth, they intercede for man. Some of them look like humans, some of them look like humans but have blue skin. It's all in the Bible. They wear glittering, sparkling clothing that looks fantastic. They can just teleport in front of people. They can teleport away from people. They can ascend up into the sky. You know what I mean? They can fly around overhead, shining light down on you. All these things the Bible talks about, the messengers doing. They intercede on the earth. They often come to earth to create or destroy, right? So when God created life on the earth, the sons of God, who are messengers, who are the other created beings that he made at the same time or before, right? They wanted to attend, and God obviously, I guess, let them or wanted them to attend the creation of this on this earth. So they attended. And when God created man, it says, let us make man in our image. Now we know that God has no image according to the Bible. He has no form. If he wants to make a form for himself, I'm sure he can do whatever he wants. Nobody can tell him what to do. He can do whatever he wants, right? So I believe he can take on a human-looking form like the Ancient of Days if he wants to, right? But technically speaking, by default, God is a spirit, he is holy, and he has no form, he has no image, and he has no physical body. Okay? But God created man in his image. How does this make any sense? Well, God chose an image that he wanted to use to represent himself, or whatever aspect that it was that he wanted it to represent, and that was man. I personally believe that the primordial Son of God, who is Jesus, his primordial heavenly pre-existing existence, he most likely, or could likely have been the first created in human form anywhere in the cosmos. Uh, you know, if not necessarily the very first, but it's very possible. But I do dub Jesus as the primordial Son of God, based on what the New Testament says, anyways, right? But it's a nice fitting term that explains within its own title a lot of potent qualities and aspects of Jesus. So Jesus is the primordial Son of God. So, anyways, in my opinion, God has no image, but when he wanted to create an image for this chosen type of being, out of all the others that he had created, he wanted to make a certain one, which is the human form, human. And my belief is that the very first one was Jesus. That's why Jesus is his firstborn and blah, blah, blah. So he made a lot of messengers in that human form. Jesus is the primordial one. That also explains Jesus' love and connection to everybody like family. But anyways, that's just my opinion. But nonetheless, I believe scripture backs it up. But nonetheless, that's not important here. So Jesus, or whoever, was created the first in the human form, but he also created many others in human form as well, and maybe even human form but slightly different from one another, such as the angel Daniel saw, which looked human but they had blue skin, which is pretty cool. But nonetheless, right? So he made human like messengers in all forms. And this was back at the Genesis. And some of them attended the creation on this earth. So when God said, let us make man in our image, getting back to that, God had already created his son, Jesus, the firstborn, the primordial Son of God, born to be the prince, the heavenly prince, and the heavenly high priest from his own birth and creation, or whatever it is. Right? So Jesus was the first, in my theological opinion. Okay, that's why he leads the whole cosmos and all beings are under him. But anyways, so where was I going with this here? So human form. Yeah, so anyways, I was just talking about messengers in general, I think, in the scriptures. But they're also classified, I waffled there for a bit, but messengers are, the term for messengers is interchangeable with the word star. So star is an allegorical, like metaphorical euphemism you can use for messenger. And this is seen in the Tanakh and in the New Testament. So what I did anyways for today was I searched up the occurrences of the term stars, so plural, and messengers, the plural. Of course, there's other verses that mention star singular and messenger singular. But anyways, there's a lot of verses here, and I don't want to read them all because it's going to take an extra hour, and I don't want to do that. But there are some key verses here that stress the importance, that ties back to what I was talking about at the end of days. So we've seen all these mystery drone vehicles, orbs, whatever they are, flying around for the last month or so. It's undeniable. They're not just in America, but there's a lot of them in America. They're around the world. They've even, been over where I live. I saw some the other day, right? So it's undeniable that they're appearing everywhere, okay? And I've said so many things on this topic before. I don't want to repeat myself. I've talked about them in recent update videos and stuff. But they're clearly here for a reason, okay? But this only further fulfills the biblical prophecy perspective because, like I said, the final thread that's left to occur is them going against Jerusalem, unfortunately, right? But that could happen at any given moment, right? It's not like that requires 10 more years or anything else. That is literally just the last thing that is left. But if you look at other additional verses outside of those prophecies, but other additional prophetic verses, even from Jesus' own mouth, when asked by the disciples, tell us some signs that will show us that you are here, that the end of days is arrived. Like they ask Jesus that, and he gives them a famous discourse on what they will see. And his answer to this is when you see the stars falling from the heavens and this and that there. Okay, so very famous response. So, of course, we'll see those verses in the list here for stars, but I'm also going to read some for the list of messengers, but there's too many for that, so I'm not going to read them all. But in reading these verses, it will show you all just how big a role the celestial messengers play in the end of days arrival. So this is part of this final thread. Jerusalem will have its issue, and then, according to Zechariah and Ezekiel, once Jerusalem has been gone against, so to speak, that provokes God and Messiah to arrive. Then Daniel 7 will be fulfilled because Messiah arrives with the clouds of the heavens and the great judgment occurs, right? This combines with Revelation, the various chapters and places in Revelation and throughout the New Testament, a lot of verses I'm about to read, where it says that Jesus will come with all the messengers, okay, and he will send them out to the corners of the earth to separate the good from the wicked and to rapture away the good and to forsake the wicked on the earth amidst all the bad stuff. So lots of verses in the Bible that talk about this. So if what Jesus has told us as a direct answer when questioned, what is a sign that you're here, it's the end of days type thing, Jesus says, when you see the stars falling. Now we know scientifically a sun will not fall. He could be talking about shooting stars, but shooting stars happen throughout the year. There's Perseids, Taurids, there's all sorts of things every month throughout the year. Any night you go, you could probably see a shooting star. Okay, maybe there's gonna be a lot of shooting stars. I don't know, but it's 100% fair to say that seeing stars falling could be a direct metaphor for the messengers coming down to the earth. Okay, so if you think about it, an ancient, more primitive person looking up and seeing stars falling in a vision, what looks like stars falling would be lights falling down or coming down to the earth. Correct? Yes. What could this veritably be, if that's the correct word? Verily be? Well, it could verily be the messengers coming down to the earth, whether good or bad ones, because even the Bible says what the Cliff Webbot says will happen. It says that the armies of Satan and all his other fallen angels, the bad extraterrestrials, they got kicked out of heaven after Jesus was crucified and ascended up. They did battle, and Michael battled against them, and they were cast out of heaven. They're banned from heaven, and they're bound to the earth. So after the crucifixion and after that battle, Satan and all of the other naughty extraterrestrials have been bound to this earth. Maybe I've argued they can go to the moon as well, but they can't go past it because that's part of Earth. I don't know, but they're bound to this earth according to the Bible. So if you call yourself a Christian, you should believe that yes, they're bound to this earth. They're not out there in space. Jesus said also that there were strong ones who are invading the heavens and trying to go against the kingdom of God up until this day that he's speaking of. And that is a direct reference to Satan and his forces polluting the heavens prior to their banishment from the heavens after the crucifixion, right? So we know that the Bible reveals that these bad aliens have been bound here on this earth, that's Satan and them. I cover in the book here how a lot of them were probably released in 1948 as per the prophecy from the book of First Enoch. That was an astonishing find as well. But nonetheless, the UFO sightings in general, whether they're good or bad beings piloting them, nobody knows in any given individual case, unless you interact with the beings or something and can tell. But 99.9% of all UFO sightings and whatnot, even military ones, nobody knows whether they're good or bad because most of the time they're not doing anything particularly good or bad. They're just flying around observing, right? But UFO sightings they started occurring in 1948, ties into what I talk about in my books. But not only that, they've picked up in the last year or two. It's undeniable. If you look at any of the major and credible sources, the sightings have gone up profusely. When I was younger, a teenager growing up, a couple decades ago or so, it was very rare for anybody to ever see a UFO in their lifetime. The few people who ever saw UFOs were regarded as crazy. And there were actually very few UFO photos available in the field of UFOlogy. Very, very, very few. It was a rare thing, a rare chance to see a UFO and let alone have a camera. But everybody's had cameras recently. But the thing is, there were not a lot of sightings, even up until the not recent, but the recent decades of my life. People on average did not see UFOs. It is in the last few years that UFO sightings have increased so much and around the world that the average person has seen a UFO now. If they ever bother to look up at the sky, that is, of course. right? If you never look up at the sky, you're not going to see one, right? But the people that who do, that's why like it's almost that the average person has seen a UFO, and there's thousands and thousands of clips of UFOs people get on their phones. But people have had phones for decades too. It's not like phones came out in the last few years. Sightings have increased in the last few years. It is undeniable. And with these mystery drone things flying around in the orbs, doing all their displays everywhere, this just shows what? It shows what would have looked like to ancient peoples stars, because that's what these glowing orbs or vehicles will look like. They will look like stars or angels flying around. That's what they will call them. And ironically, that's what they are. They are the messengers, right? And they would see them coming down because normally stars are in outer space. So if you see the stars in the sky, you might even see them coming down in the sky. What is an ancient person going to see if that is what's being shown to them in the vision? They would say stars coming down to the earth, stars falling down, the powers of the heavens being shaken, because you're seeing what look like stars that are normally fixed up in the heavens, they're starting to come down to the earth, right? And doing these spectacles. So what we're seeing on the earth now with this undeniable spectacle and phenomenon that's going on, this display really, they're doing monitoring and observation. I don't feel that it's nefarious. I feel that they're possibly most likely here for our benefit, and that they're also doing this display on purpose to show us that they're here for our benefit and not for anything nefarious. I think that's why they're doing it so openly with so many witnesses and flying around as if they want to be seen, to be noticed, because they're trying to bring people into the awareness that, hey, we're here to help you and protect you. And it's obviously they've shown up doing all these activities because something's going to happen, right? Which plays into the Cliff Webbot prediction and also plays into what the Bible says will occur. So when we got these verses here talking about the stars coming down to the earth, we can see that there is a direct and undeniable connection to these events here. Okay, we are probably just at the start of it right now, and it might continue to escalate and become more profuse, right? They might make even more stunning. I mean, where they have appeared, I mean, sometimes there's been dozens of them doing spectacular displays. I mean, if you lived there and saw that, you've already had the spectacular display. But not everybody sees a spectacular display. Most people might just see some of them, or they're just very mysterious. Nobody knows what they're doing. But in terms of putting on a huge light show and doing all these fantastic spectacles, they do occur already. But maybe there's going to come a time where it's just going to escalate and there's going to be a mega spectacle. And I just stubbornly believe we'll be safeguarded as best possible throughout whatever is coming to happen. Maybe it's a natural disaster or event. Who knows? Solar flare or meteors or something like that there. We don't know. Or maybe, like the Bible says, all of this is, going to come where the naughty aliens who are bound to this earth are going to rise up when they see Jesus coming. So when Jesus arrives, they're going to do battle. That's what Revelation talks about. I went off track earlier, but that was one of the things I was getting to. So the Bible says that we're going to see those things. Satan was once up in heaven. He's one of the fallen angels. They were cast out of heaven and bound to this earth. That explains all the bad ETs that have bases or stations in places on this earth and have activity in terrestrial craft for this earth. Why would they have that? Why would they be stationed here? Why are they bad? Well, the Bible talked about it, right? And this Cliff Webbot prediction and my dreams as well of these events that are going to take place, all these things just confirm that there are good ones out there as well, and the good ones are actually already here, preparing like preliminary measures, doing whatever it is they're doing in their own mission and operations, but they're here for preliminary measures because some big event is coming. And what would that big event be? Will it be the arrival of the legions of the heavens? It would be Jesus, like these verses will say, arriving with all the messengers of the heavens. That could cause chaos in the world. People might be scared it's an alien invasion. You know what I mean? But at the same time, ironically, like the Bible says, the bad messengers who are imprisoned here will rise up and there'll be a sky battle. Okay, so Revelation says that we're going to see that. Cliff Webbot prediction says we're going to see that. I saw those things in my prophetic dreams, just an added little extra cherry on top, right? So there's too much evidence showing what should occur, and what we see occurring now is falling directly in hand with that. Okay, you can't be flying around mystery vehicles and all these fantastic things everywhere for so long over sensitive places, over so many countries, right? And then there's no repercussions. Like nothing comes of it. Like that can't occur. Like in any sensible nation, the governments have to find out what's going on and have to give the people some type of story, whether it's true or buttered up to help keep them happy and safe, right? Whatever the case may be. But that no story has even been given yet. Even a unplausible story hasn't been given yet. Like no story has been given yet in America. So is this continues to happen. So obviously it's a superior technology from a superior force, and it is doing a friendly display, is doing friendly monitoring for whatever reason, appears to be preliminary measures, and it's doing so visibly and openly because it wants to show us that it is not hostile, okay, and it's here to benefit us, right? Not one of those things flying over people's houses shot laser guns at the houses. If they were bad, naughty aliens up there just here to do no good, like gremlins or something like that, and they had laser guns on their little UFOs, don't you think they'd be going pew, 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 pew? But they haven't. They haven't done anything bad. They didn't land in people's yards and take away their people and turn them into xenomorphs, right? Nothing crazy has happened, right? So it's obviously a force of good. I mean, why else? I've said before, if you look at a coral reef scenario, right, for like an allegory here, right, human scientists would only deploy, I mean, when human scientists deploy these little submersible submarine cameras and they fly around the coral reefs that they don't want to swim to, and their submarine camera thing is floating around, swimming around all the little fish, and the fish are looking at that thing like, what on earth is that? That's a UFO, right? So all the little fish are going up to it. You got the real brave, inquisitive fish that go up to it and bite at it because they want it out of their territory. But they're going to be astounded at this thing that's down there. But what is that thing that's down there? Oh, some scientists sent it, and the scientists aren't doing this operation to detriment the coral reef. They're actually doing it to help protect the coral reef, to learn things, to gather information. And I think when you apply that scenario to what's happening now, you can recognize and appreciate that what is taking place logically is that scenario, because you have what is akin to observation drones, just like the human submersible camera in the coral reef scenario. You have those mystery drones, which are most typically used for observation. They're also flying around in patterns and in grids over houses on time periods each night as if they were gathering information. The most obvious thing that they could be doing is gathering information. So it's fair to say that these are, like that submersible camera, observation and monitoring, data gathering drones, but they are from a civilization more advanced than any human civilization. And they're doing all of this and not doing anything negative to anybody because something is about to happen, obviously, and they're gathering information and data because they require it for some reason or whatnot. And again, it's not just happening in New Jersey. You have to appreciate it's happening in many, many places. Like I said, I even saw them in my country, and they're being seen everywhere around the world, right? So it's undeniably something is about to happen. And if you're a Bible believer, the Bible never talks about a fake alien invasion. It never talks about a fake rapture. Nowhere in the Bible does it ever say anywhere in Tanakh or New Testament that beings or bad aliens or demons are going to arrive and kidnap people and take them away in a fake rapture. Nowhere does it say that they're going to arrive and it's going to be an alien invasion from the skies or the heavens. That is not spoken of anywhere. The only things that will be arriving from the heavens are Jesus with the legions of the angels. They are the ones that will be arriving in the heavens. People of the earth may misinterpret that. That's the problem. If you have angels materialize into your room to rapture you away, like the verses say, two will be at the mill, one will be taken, and one will be left, right? The eagles will gather around the people and so forth, eagles representing the angels, right? When all these angels start materializing or teleporting or landing or coming in, however they arrive, how are you going to react to that? Like, people are going to shock out, freak out, and think it's an alien invasion. And you got a lot of Christians out there teaching that aliens are all evil, they're all demons, and that they're going to come here and do this fake alien invasion. And people, all these silly conspiracy theories that tie over to the governments and this and that there. I don't believe governments are evil. I don't believe America is evil. I don't believe that. But a lot of people do believe those kind of conspiracy theories. I think that they are trying to protect people, not harm people, the government and the military and all that. There's a lot of passionate people in those. There's bad people in all positions, right? But the main core of those people are good people who want the best for everybody in America. I don't believe those crazy conspiracy theories. Um, but they may not know themselves the truth about what would be coming, which is the biblical event. They may not know it. They might just see this huge armada coming in from outer space or be detecting it on instruments, and that might be part of the secret. Or they might know the whole story that in whatever year, 2025 or whatever, that there's going to be this giant arrival and there's going to be this huge conflict in the sky. Maybe they know that and they kept it secret from us so that we can live a normal life up until that point. And you know what? That's something to thank them for. And that to me has been one of my primary beliefs as to why all the secrecy probably occurred, because they knew some big event was coming and they want everybody to be able to live a normal life. They want economies to still be able to exist. You know what I mean? That's the only way people can get out of poverty. You can't get out of poverty for the world if you're letting economies become shattered by panic and all this and that there. So they've helped everybody live a normalish life and keep going for all this time. And I'm just throwing it out there as a theory that maybe something is coming. So, but nonetheless, these are the verses, right? So let's just read some of these here real quick. I don't want to take too long. But this is all the occurrences of stars in the New Testament. If we look at Matthew 24:29, it's the first occurrence of it. And Jesus says, and immediately after the tribulation of those days, so this is after all the bad, like tribulation-y type stuff occurs from when he was on earth until the arrival of the end days. Because he spends like half the chapter describing all sorts of stuff, diseases, wars, conflicts will arise. And then after he describes all that, he says, and immediately after the tribulation of those days. So all that stuff leading up to it, that'll all pass. And then he says, when the end arrives, the sun will be dark, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Okay, so we know that the beings up in the heavens will be coming down to the earth. The powers of the heavens, that's the beings that are up there. Those powers shall be shaken, right? And then in Mark 13:25, and the stars of the heaven shall be falling, and the powers that are in the heavens shall be shaken. And then in Luke 21:25, and there shall be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and on the land is distress of nations with perplexity, sea and billow roaring. And then there's not that many occurrences of the term stars in the New Testament. I'm reading over ones that are just literally talking about stars. But then we have some describing the fallen angels, which again were messengers from the heavens, symbolized as stars. In Jude 1:13, it says, wild waves of a sea. This is describing the fallen angels, foaming out of their own shames, stars going astray, to whom the gloom of the darkness to the age has been kept. Right? It's talking about the fallen angels who got imprisoned under the earth, right? So he calls them stars going astray. And in another verse, he calls them clouds without water that just travel over the land causing problems, right? I can't remember the term, like causing sin or problems or mischief or something like that. Right? So stars going astray. Well, if you have stars fixed up in the sky to a primitive observer, and you start seeing these stars move around and come down to the earth, we know that that would be extraterrestrial vehicles piloted by extraterrestrials in some way. But to an ancient person, to them, it looks like stars falling or coming down to the earth, or stars going astray. Okay, and stars going astray represents them going down from their blessed origins and disobeying God, interfering with earth and its creation, and being cast down here. That's what happened to Satan and his messengers, right? So stars going astray. Then in Revelation, we have a few verses using the term stars where it's talking about the seven assemblies, and Jesus says there are seven stars. These are the seven messengers of the seven assemblies. And then in Revelation 6:13, it says, and the stars of the heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree does cast her winter figs by a great wind being shaken. And this is one of the things that's taking place amidst the trumpet, seals, and vials, right? So outside of those occurrences, these are the pertinent uses of the term stars in relation to messengers or in any other type of cryptic context. All the others are just directly some other use of stars in a more direct or mundane sense, right? But from that alone, we see that Jesus has given a strong warning that we will see stars falling, coming down to the earth, right? And undeniably, that type of stuff has already started now, right? So we have more reason to believe now than ever before with the Israel events taking place and with these mystery, you know, craft lights, whatever you want to call them, with these things taking place around the world, even in my country. It's happening everywhere. This stuff is undeniable. It's extremely powerful. It's mysterious. It's out of our hands, out of our control. It's undeniably taking place, right? And Jesus himself said that these are the final sprinkles, right? The final sprinkles. Like when they asked Jesus, what is a sign that you're here and blah, 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 that the end has arrived. This is part of it from the Gospels when he's giving that discourse. And it surmises with, it concludes with the sprinkles on top of all the ice cream he presented. Those sprinkles are the additional pieces of proof as witnesses, signs that the end is here, and that is the stars falling down. Okay, so if we go look at the term messengers in the New Testament, the plural, let's go read these because it's very powerful in revealing what messengers will be doing at the end of days. So in Matthew 4:11, it's interesting that when Jesus was being tempted in the wilderness, against the devil, it says that messengers came and were ministering to Jesus in Matthew 4:11, right? So he's had a lot of interaction with these messengers, right? Not a lot of people know that verse. That's why I read it. But going on, Matthew 13:39 says, the harvest is the full end of the age, and the reapers are messengers. Okay, so again, messengers is the biblical term for the messengers, the host of the heavens, the celestial host that live where the sun, moon, and stars are, up in outer space, right? So when it says the reapers are messengers at the full end of the age harvest, that's a pretty significant thing. In Matthew 13:41, and the Son of Man shall send forth his messengers, and they shall gather up out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and those doing the unlawlessness. So we're going to have celestial beings arrive with Jesus. They're going to go out and reap the earth, okay? And they're going to gather up the good. They're going to gather up the bad. They're going to separate them. This is going to be a mega event, okay? A mega event. And in Matthew 13:49, so it shall be in the full end of the age, the messengers shall come forth and separate the evil out of the midst of the righteous. In Matthew 16:27, for the Son of Man is about to come in the glory of his Father with his messengers, then he will reward each according to his work. And then in Matthew 18:10, it reveals that we have these watchers who watch over us throughout our lives. It says, beware that ye may not despise one of these little ones, for I say to you that their messengers in the heavens do always behold the face of my Father who is in the heavens. So these messengers watch over us throughout our life, even from the age of being a child. They watch over us from the heavens. They're watchers. They monitor and observe for our benefit, and they're working for God, and they can see God's face, it says. That's a very powerful verse, right? And then in Matthew 24:31, this is from the same chapter where Jesus gives his discourse on what will occur at the end of days. It says, and he shall send his messengers. This is at Jesus' arrival. He shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet. That's the final trumpet, the seventh trumpet. And they shall gather together his chosen from the four winds, from the ends of the heavens unto the ends thereof. So the messengers, they don't just arrive with Jesus in a huge army, fleet, or armada. They're sent out by Jesus. They're the reapers. They gather up the wicked. They gather up the good, right? God is the judge, but he's telling them who to gather and put in what category. They're going to go out to everybody across the world. This is a mega event, and this is what the Bible says will occur. In Matthew 25:31, it gives further testimony to it. It says, whenever the Son of Man may come in his glory, and all the holy messengers with him, then he shall sit upon a throne of his glory. Then Matthew 25:41, it references the fire that's been prepared for the devil and his messengers, being the fallen messengers. And then in Mark 8:38, it references when he may come, when he may come in the glory of his Father with the holy messengers. So there's so many verses that show that Jesus arrives with the celestial host. Mark 13:27, then he shall send his messengers and gather together his chosen from the four winds, from the end of the earth unto the end of heaven. Let's see where else. Here's a verse talking about how God promised in the Tanakh prophecies that he would commission angels to protect Jesus. Luke 4:10, for it has been written to his messengers, he will give charge concerning thee to guard over thee. I believe that's when Satan was trying to tempt Jesus to, turn a rock into a stone or jump off a cliff or something stupid. Um, let's see. There's a lot more of these. I don't want to read them all. Luke 12:8 is pretty important. And I say to you, everyone, whoever may confess with me before men, the Son of Man shall also confess with him before the messengers of God. So these messengers of God, this host that serve God and stand on his right side, like the book of Psalms say, and they praise God and bless God and all of that, and they serve God and work for him and do things for him, they're highly relevant to all the end days events. They arrive with Jesus. They go out and do things for God and Jesus. They gather the people, separate the people. They probably help punish the people. We know from the story of Lazarus that they take the good and the bad to their places after death. And it is very significant stuff that these messengers are put in charge of. These are likely very powerful beings as well. Jesus is the primordial Son of God, heavenly high priest, and heavenly high prince. He is the commander of all of them, right? Like the scripture says. But nonetheless, these are very powerful beings, right? And they're all part of this judgment process. It says they'll confess him before the messengers of God. Even Jesus said that. And then in Luke 12:9, likewise, it says, and he who has denied me before men shall be denied before the messengers of God. So God involves this heavenly host in all these great activities, right? In Luke 15:10, because they watch over us and, individuals, and they care about us and they probably love us as family, because our citizenship, it says, is in the heavens. We have homes and everything and mansions prepared for us in the heavens. We go on to a new earth. Jesus, well, it's revealed to us in scripture. I can't remember if Jesus says it. I believe it's in Matthew or John 17, where it says that we are sojourners on the earth and we're not of this earth. That's revealed to us as well. But those are deeper, more interesting things. But we have citizenship up in the heavens. We're one of the sons of God likewise. That's what Jesus revealed to us. But in either case, we have this great family type vibe from the messengers. And we know that they watch over us, even children. But it says here that they take great joy when we reform from our sins. It says, so I say to you, such joy does come before the messengers of God over one sinner reforming. So when you reform from your sin, which is what you're supposed to biblically do, even the messengers, the angels of God, celebrate because they care about you. You're part of the heavenly family, right? They're righteous and powerful beings. Luke 16 is where it talks about the Lazarus story, but I won't read that. In Luke 20, verse 36, it mentions how messengers, maybe not all, but at least some messengers cannot die. They're like immortals. It says, for neither are they able to die anymore, for they are like messengers. They are sons of God, being sons of the rising again. That goes back to Genesis, where it says that the sons of God were present at the creation. And they said, let us make man in our image. How, we're all made in this human image. I believe Jesus was the first in this image. That's why he's so important and relevant in all these things as the firstborn, the Son of God, the Prince, the heir, you know what I mean, in that sense, as the Prince, the second in charge type thing and all of that. But anyways, right, that links all back to that there, the sons of God. Then next, in John 1:51, a vision where it says, you will see the heaven open and the messengers of God going up and coming down upon the Son of Man. Two messengers basically teleported to Jesus's graveside when Mary was there. And it says she stooped down to the tomb and beholdeth two messengers in white were sitting. There's other verses where it says that messengers appeared wearing dazzling or glittering clothing. In Acts 7:53, it reveals that the law of Sinai was given by, or the law to Moses was given by messengers. That's in Acts 7. In Romans 8:38 is the verse where it categorizes powers and principalities as messengers. That relates to the prior verse which says the powers of the heavens shall be shaken when the stars are falling down. It says that messengers, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present. That's Romans 8:38. In 1 Corinthians 4:9, it says that we have become a spectacle to the world and unto messengers and to men. So we are a spectacle to those watchers who watch us. Let's see, where else? It tells us not to worship the messengers in Colossians 2:18. And 2 Thessalonians 1:7, it says, rest with us in the revelation of the Lord Jesus from heaven with messengers of his power. Just another reference to Jesus arriving with the messengers. In 1 Timothy 3:16, it references how God and Jesus, through Jesus's life here, that he was seen by messengers, preached amongst nations, believed on in the world, and taken up in glory. So being seen by messengers, by heavenly celestial messengers, was a relevant thing to mention there. That's important. The messengers are the ones that provided that flying light that guided the people to the birth of baby Jesus. When they arrived at the birth of the baby Jesus, a group of the heavenly host teleported in. If you read the text, that's what it says happens. They just appeared there. They all celebrated, and when the celebration was finished, the heavenly host that had arrived ascended up into the heavens and disappeared. Right? So messengers have always played a part in all of these things. So being seen by messengers, you know what I mean? In Hebrews 1:6, it references how when Jesus was born into the world, it says, and let them bow before him, all messengers of God. So Jesus being the primordial Son of God, the first in the human form, it makes sense that all would bow unto him. If we all came from him, maybe we're all of his physical seed as well. That'd be more interesting, but it's not important. You know what I mean? But we're all sons of God, and we're all this part of this celestial family. And what else? What other verses can I read? In Hebrews 13:2, it's one example where it says that messengers can look human. It says, of the hospitality be not forgetful, for through this unawares did certain people entertain messengers and not realize it. Hebrews 12:22, but you came to Mount Zion and the city of the living God, to the heavenly Jerusalem, and to myriads of messengers. Reference again, the messengers are always a part of everything. The heavenly Jerusalem, we know, is a city that flies and comes down from the heavens where the stars are. It comes down to the earth. It states its dimensions, its size. Okay. Messengers are on it. You know what I mean? We go up into it. What is that other than a giant mothership type craft for the messengers, for the angels, right? Pretty interesting stuff. That's supposed to come at the end of days as well. In 2 Peter 2:4, talking about the fallen angels, for if God messengers who sinned did not spare, but with chains of thick gloom, having cast them down to Tartarus, did deliver them to judgment, having been reserved. And again in Jude 1:6, messengers also, those who did not keep their own principality, but did leave their proper dwelling to a judgment of a great day, in bonds everlasting under darkness he is kept. And then there's, a few other verses that aren't worth reading. They're readable, but they're not worth reading, spending more time. I'm on the final page of verses now, I believe. So let's see. It's all from Revelation. Just a lot of verses about messengers, in the heavenly throne scenario and stuff. The messengers are also the ones who dispense the vials of wrath. Mentions the four messengers, the four fallen angels who are released in Revelation 9 to slay 1/3 of mankind. So the messengers are the ones blowing the trumpets, pouring the vials, opening the seals type of thing. So all these events are tied into messengers in the end of days. So all these big, spooky, terrible events, they're all tied into messengers, right? Loosed are the four messengers, especially in Revelation 9:15 alone. So all these end days events pertain to messengers. Like messengers play a big part. So bad messengers will be doing stuff against us. Then Jesus arrives with the good messengers. The good messengers do battle against the bad messengers, and the good messengers also help us in the judgment period and separate the good and the bad, and they'll rapture away the good to the new earth, to a safe place, right? And the bad will be left here to be further judged, punished, and whatever else, right? So that's the order of events according to Revelation. It 100% involves messengers from start to finish, right? Let's see. I'm halfway through this final page. Like, right, for example, and come forth did the seven messengers having the seven plagues out of the sanctuary, clothed in linen, pure and shining. And, then they go and sprinkle the 7 final plagues onto the earth, right? It's all tied into messengers. Other chapters in Revelation, it says a star came down to the earth, or a messenger came down to the earth, right? It's all about messengers interacting with the earth in the end of the days. So, yeah, that's all the verses I need to read. So that's pretty good. I got a lot of the necessary verses read for that. So, anyways, that's a long enough talk. I'll get going now. But thank you all for coming by, and thank you, man, for coming. I gotta get ready to go somewhere later tonight. I'll see if I can make a shorter video. I was hoping this one wasn't so long, but anyways, take care, folks. God bless you all. Yeah, and happy